Wow, it is cold outside. It's freezing. Hi, everyone. So Kim here with Native Lady Bookwear. So the first thing I am going to do is just take off my jacket, get comfortable, and I am going to wrap up my reads for October. Yes, I am very behind, but of course, there's been a lot going on in my family. So let's just get to it and let's get started. Alrighty, so Vituave, welcome to my channel. My name is Kim, and today I am going to be wrapping up my October read. So yes, it's been a very busy month. It's been a very busy 3 months, actually. I've had a recent tragedy in my husband's family, so I'm not willing to share that right now because I feel that should stay within us. But I am so happy to share what I read for the month of October. So during the month of October, I had some really amazing reads. I read 9 books in total. It also was a mix of physical ebooks and audio books, and I just had such a great time. I also participated in the Lockbook Titians or Breeze Blackoweenathon, and I had so much fun. Okay, so first things first, if you see animals or kids or life partners running around in the background, I apologize. It is in the middle of the day on a Friday. I actually work 10-hour days this week, so I actually have a 3-day weekend, so it's pretty awesome. Yeah, let's get started. The first book that I read in October, it was The Inheritance of Orchidia Divina, and that book is written by Zoraida Cordova and narrated by Frankie Corzo. So really amazing narration. This book is pretty awesome. Wow. I had such an amazing time with this book, and this book I read through audiobook, and it was given to me by Libro FM. So thank you, Libro FM, so much for this audiobook. I had such an amazing time. And this book is an intergenerational magical realism novel about a Latin matriarch named Orchidia Divina. During this time, she calls upon her family or her descendants, the Montoya family, and she calls upon them to claim their inheritance in announcing that she is very close to death. Orchidia is such an amazing character. I mean, I've read characters like Orchidia before, but Orchidia, I think the element that really stood out to me that I just wanted more of, wanted to find out more about her because she's a very mysterious character. She's also formidable. She's definitely the living embodiment of a matriarch. And she, during that time of her calling her descendants home, she warned her family of this generational curse that they are possibly going to walk into. So Orchidia's departure from the family during that time, she passes on magical abilities to her descendants. I also really enjoyed how the perspectives steadily made their way towards one another. So the storyline isn't this linear storyline. It's 2 storylines taking place, or actually multiple storylines taking place. And they're kind of like making this journey to one another and revealing events that took place in Orchidia's time that is now being passed on, or those events are now affecting her descendants and her family. But I think what I really enjoyed about the characters and those perspectives and those storylines is that the story was made stronger because the family relationship and connections were also strengthened during that time. And it was so cool. This book also has so many cultural elements easily interwoven within the plots and the characters. I didn't see a whole lot of the author explaining things. I feel like a lot of those things were really interwoven into the events that were taking place in the book, like mythology, storytelling, Latin storytelling. So I feel it was such an incredible read and it was amazing. So I also appreciated how magic and the strength of storytellings and myths is really grounded in the roots of the book, and how it's very inseparable. I'm sorry, my dog is just jumping around over here, wrestling with something. So I'm sorry if you hear that in the background. So those elements were very much grounded, and it was also inseparable from culture, from intergenerational familial bonds and strengths and familial roots. And I enjoyed the interaction between the family so much, and the strong character building that took place. And I don't even want to say it was character building. I feel like the author was able to reveal the layers of character that's already within these really amazing characters, and to peel back layers, but also to reveal the connection that they have to one another, and how family is just this really diverse thing that we all have. But I think seeing that beautifully and colorfully come to light on the pages, or in this case, the audiobook, was awesome. And lastly, I think the another thing that I want to say about this book, the audiobook specifically, I had a much better time enjoying this through audiobook. And I think that was just because of the language and the cultural elements within the book. I know that if I read the physical book, I probably wouldn't have had a better time. So me enjoying hearing the language and then also the culture, I feel it added like way more to my reading experience. So yeah, awesome. So first book I read in October. All right, so the second book that I read for the month of October is The Changeling by Victor LaValle. And wow, I really enjoyed this book. This book was recommended to me by the very awesome Stephanie from Stephanie Bookish. And Stephanie, thank you so much for recommending this book. I had such an amazing time. It starts off with a generation before the main character or the main protagonist, which is Apollo Kagwa. Apollo Kagwa is just this young man who's coming into his life. He's starting to build a family. He has a wife. And all of a sudden, that whole happily ever after just gets turned on his head. The story really takes for a turn, and it transitions into this horrific tale of Apollo and him trying to find out what happened to his family and what he is trying to do in order to find out what is going on. The whole thing kind of starts out with him having a family, having a child, because he comes, and it starts out a generation before, and he's basically trying to become this person that his father never was. So it makes for such a better story. At the beginning is slow paced, but I really enjoyed it because I enjoyed the character building of Apollo. I appreciated those elements. I also appreciated what New York City looked like behind the eyes of Kagwa, who is a person of color, or in this case, a Black man. And it was incredible how LaValle is able to twist a horrific element of social commentary, or even how he analyzes race in a horror tale is so good. And sometimes it's funny, sometimes it's horrific, but the complexity that LaValle writes in, it makes for a much better horror tale. And I feel like I really enjoy complexity within any kind of genre, especially when you're looking at race or contemporary society, the issue of contemporary society, and the layers that are all there. But Victor LaValle cleverly writes those things in, and not by huge analysis, but just by the experiences of this character. And it's so good. It's so amazing. I am so very glad that I did not read The Leaf before I started this book. I'm just so happy about it. So people have been saying, well, this book is like fantasy, it's mystery, it's like a thriller. But in my opinion, I say that this book is first a horror, then a mystery, and then lastly a fantasy. I mean, there are thriller elements in there. And because LaValle just amazingly paints and creates these characters that I care about, that I cheer for, that it makes for a much more tense and suspenseful read. I enjoyed the slow pacing at the beginning, but it begins to pick up later, and it made me a stressful reader. But yeah, this book is really good. So thank you so much, Stephanie, for giving this mind-blowing and even at times gut-twisting book recommendation to me. It was really good, and I appreciate you and your recommendation. So yep. Okay, so I'm sorry, I am forgetting to rate the book. So the first book, The Inheritance of Orchidia Divina, I rated that book a 4.5 stars. The second book, which is The Changeling by Victor Laval, I also rated that a 4.5. So now I am coming into a 5-star read, which is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oinkan Braithwaite. Yes, I rated this a 5-star read. It was so good. It's so funny. It's horrifying and mind-boggling at times. And I so wish I read the physical book for this one. I mean, I read this book through audiobook. I was so happy to get this book finally, because I was not very hopeful. I actually I put this book on hold. I've been on hold for this book for 3 weeks. I didn't think I was going to be able to get it, but that last week of October, it popped up and I was like, yes, but I read this book in a day, or I audio read this book in a day. And I definitely want to reread this one. It was good. It gave me everything in terms like of a thriller novel. It made me laugh. It made me skip a beat. It made my jaw drop. It had me even at times sitting like at the edge, literally sitting at the edge of my seat, just listening and just waiting for the next thing to happen or the next ball to drop, so to speak. So basically this book is about 2 sisters. One is very social butterfly, flirtatious. I think she's described as being very beautiful. And then you have this other sister who is very smart, hardworking, compassionate. She's a nurse, and she is constantly running to the aid of her sister. And her sister is a serial killer. It's not something that is revealed in some huge plot twist or plot jump or anything like that. The book starts out with her sister literally killing someone. So, and it's there, the satire in this book and the sarcasm was just so good. And it made for a much better thriller. The characters of that almost, well, it's not, I wouldn't describe it as sibling rivalry, but there's definitely tension there between these 2 sisters, and how one is completely oblivious to the responsibility and even the stress that her sister takes on, because this other sister is just out there killing people. And goodness, Braithwaite's writing is just good. She creates this wonderful, suspenseful opposition, not just between these 2 sisters, but also between other characters and events that are happening in the story that I really appreciated, especially how she is able to kind of turn something horrific into this really funny, hilarious, dark humor. And this book isn't just a thriller. It's full of like family obligation and loyalty and love, and how that complexity sometimes it can be a stressful on one person, especially when you have secrets or you have a family history that affects you in such a violent way. So yeah, this book was good. This book was originally on my TBR. I was hoping to read it first, but of course it didn't turn out that way. But I'm so happy I had the opportunity to read it. I was kind of getting stressed out there thinking I wasn't gonna be able to read this book, but yep, awesomeness. Yeah, so yeah, that's the 3rd book I read in October. The 4th book that I read in the month of October was definitely a 5-star read, an easy 5-star read. It is one that I feel that is timeless. It also kind of made me think about the present state of our society right now and where it's headed. I actually hybrid read the novel. So I read the physical book, which is Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. So I actually hybrid read this book. I read the physical, as you can see right here, and also the audio book. And wow, this is so good. So this is the first book of a duology, and which is called the Earthly Duology. And this is a dystopian apocalyptic fiction, a sci-fi written by Octavia Butler, and it follows Lauren Alamina. So Lauren is a character that has a very interesting gift, and that gift is hyper empathy. Her ability causes her to be highly susceptible to others who are experiencing pain or any kind of emotion. And I feel that just added so much more to this book. It definitely created a better complexity and a more well-rounded world building when it came to that element of her gift of hyper empathy. So Lauren Alamina exists in basically a futuristic world, which is in 2023, I think. Yeah, 2023, 2024, something like that. So very close. That world, that apocalyptic world, is just falling further and further into chaos and violence and just anarchy, really. So the book starts out, Lauren is living within this community where walls are built all around these specific neighborhoods that is trying to protect them from harsh populations and elements from the outside. So Lauren's father is actually a preacher who tries to lead that group of people within that specific walls. And their community isn't the only walled community. There's all kinds of walled communities within the area that they are in, which is just outside LA or Los Angeles. Their father tries to give them hope and prepares them for a life that is not so kind, and encourages them and gives them hope through religion. And I don't want to tell you too much of what happens in this book. I mean, any apocalyptic book or dystopian book, the crap hits the fan pretty fast. And I don't want to tell you what happens during that time, but it's an element that really surprised me. I mean, there's parts of this book where I can feel it building up to there and feeling the tension rise. But when it happens, I didn't expect it to happen at that time. And it happens so quick. And it just makes for such an amazing and horrifying read, really. And I also felt uncomfortable reading this book because the first time that the poop hits the fan isn't the last time. So throughout this story, you're learning about Lauren, about what she's seeing, because this book is written in journal format of her experiencing this chaotic world and how she's seeing it through very hopeful eyes, but also witnessing these horrific events that are happening around her. One of the things I do want to share about this book, which is probably, I feel like, another reason why you should read it, is because of Lauren. And she is, like I said before, writing everything down, but she also pulls this idea, this beautiful idea out of herself. And even though she's experiencing all these awful things, she clings to the hope of having hope and faith in humanity. And it's really, really amazing to see that beauty unfold in this very violent, chaotic setting. And lastly, the thing that I want to share about this book, I think this book has pretty much a content warning for almost everything. It's very gritty. It's haunting. There's gore. There's sexual assault taking place during this book. And the occurrence of violence that is happening is very bone chilling. It's soul scarring. And it's definitely not for those who aren't able to read those things, those kinds of events, those kind of violent acts. So this book is definitely not for those who aren't able to see how violence unfolds in the midst of humanity and pandemonium happening. So again, like I said, this is an easy 5-star rating for me. I think this is something that I wish I read in high school or even junior high. This is such an amazing read, and I suggest you all pick this up. Okay, alongside this book, Parable of the Sower, I also read the graphic novel alongside the book, and it made for such a better experience. So the artwork I very much enjoyed. It definitely captured the grittiness and the chaos of this apocalyptic world. The book is adapted by Damian Duffy, and it's illustrated by John Jennings. So the art very much colorfully paints and describes the cheerlessness that just naturally is happening or naturally exists with violence, and also the grittiness. But especially those highly stressful moments of escape and tension, I feel like visually that was very much illustrated well. But if I didn't read the novel, I think the only criticism I have for the graphic novel, if I didn't read the regular novel, I don't know if I would have fully understood the hyper empathy element of Lauren's gift. But that is one thing I wish that was highlighted a little bit more in the graphic novel. But I just want to say I'm not going to rate this book because I don't feel that I have enough reading experience with graphic novels to rate it. But I just wanted to say that my experience with reading these two books simultaneously really added to my experience of reading Parable of the Sower. Yeah, it was good. I really liked it. So that was another book that I read alongside Parable of the Sower. Okay, so the next book that I wrote, oh wait, I didn't write any book. The next book that I read in the month of October was an interesting and surprising read. I enjoyed it, not immensely. I feel like there was a lot to be left for me to be explored. It's definitely the first of a series. It reads like the first of a series. And that book is called My Soul to Keep by Tanana Reeve Dew. Wow, what an amazing writer. It was so... Hi, Luke. What are you doing? Oh, sorry. My son's getting a cup of water. So the book is called My Soul to Keep. It wasn't on my original TBR for the month of October, but I'm very glad I read it. I was, again, chatting with my book buddy, Stephanie from Stephanie Bookish, and she asked me if I read Tanana Reeve Dew's The Good House. And I was really interested in reading that book, and we were talking about it while I was discussing my experience with me reading The Changeling, and she asked me if I read that book, and I was like, no, I haven't read it. And she was like, yeah, you got to read that book. So I looked up the author, and I couldn't find that book on Libby. So I was like, okay, what else is there? So I started scrolling down, and I saw this book. It was the audiobook, and this audiobook is the first of a series called the African Immortal series, or Immortal African series. I think it's African Immortal series. But I went into this book very new. Again, I didn't read the leaf. I didn't read what the book was about. And it starts out slow. The pacing is slow. And I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the slow pacing. And if you all don't like slow pacing horror reads, then this book probably isn't for you. I was reading some of the reviews after I finished this book, and some of them are even comparing it to like vampire paranormal books, and to me it definitely did not read that way. I don't know why the first thing while I was reading this book, the first thing that didn't jump out to me was like, whoa, this reads like a vampire book. But to me, it didn't. I do see elements that compare it to possibly like a vampire paranormal read. And the only element that I saw there was the mortal being part. The book starts out with a character. Her name is Jessica. And she meets this marvel of a man in college, and that man's name is David. And she thinks that he's just this perfect, brilliant, intelligent, wonderful person who later becomes her husband, and then also this terrific parent and partner. but you start to see that there's something not quite right with him. And you see that pretty early, and it's something that you just don't discover. You find out right away that David, or Dawit, is an immortal, and he's protecting a secret. And this secret is something that spans 400 years earlier, when he first becomes an immortal. And that secret and the cost of protecting his secret is actually hurting Jessica. I mean, you end up seeing that there's people around her that end up being hurt, or they end up something quite tragic ends up happening to them. And pretty much that is all I want to say about that in terms of the plot of what's going on. But what I really like about the slow pacing of this book is that you really dig into the past and also analyze a little bit of the mindset of Dawit, or David, and you begin to see how his current interactions with Jessica are very much have been impacted by violence and very awful experiences and tragedies that he's experienced in his long 400 years. And you also see how he and because of that immortality of him not being able to die, and also him being long lived and experiencing all of these things, and how that past very much shapes his present, and possibly even the future and the futures of those that he comes into contact with. So David, or Dawit, is definitely one of those characters. I didn't really enjoy reading, but I really enjoyed not liking him, if that makes sense. What was surprising about this book is to see it jump from this slow pacing read and just kind of peeking into the life of this small family, and then all of a sudden it gets intense. The tension is building. You feel kind of like walls closing in around this character, and of course you see how that very confinement, that mental and that psychological and that physical confinement of this character starts affecting those who he loves. And it's kind of horrific and bone chilling. There's a funny story. When I was actually listening to this book, I was actually on a trip on a weekend in October. I think me and my daughters, I took them to their orthodontic appointment, or maybe we went to town to go get groceries. I don't remember, but I was listening to this book on my way back, and the girls ended up taking out one of their earbuds and then listening along right beside me on the last third of this book. And it was really fast paced. It was intense. And so when we got back home, I was still continued to listen to this audio book, and the girls were like, "Mom, what's happening? What happened? What did they do? What's going on?" So it was, even my daughters, they didn't even know what was happening in the first half of this book, but yet they were pretty much invested by not by the characters, but just by the plot, how the plot was moving along. So at this point, I'm pretty intrigued right now of what the second book is going to look like. But one thing I have to admit, people, is I am not so good at continuing series. So for example, I really want to finish, like, my first priority in terms of series at this point is Parable of the Talents, which is the second book. Number 2, Earthseed book by Octavia Butler. I also want to read the second book of Fevered Star, which is the Between Earth and Sky series by Rebecca Roanhorse. And I also need to finish the Inheritance trilogy and or even just start the Broken Earth series by N.K. Jemisin. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. I'm just so bad at not continuing books that have like a second, third, or even fourth installment. I used to be pretty good at them, about finishing series and continuing into series, especially when I was just basically a fantasy reader. But now there's just so many things that I want to read. So sometimes it slips my mind that, wow, I haven't even started the second book to this series, or I haven't even started this series that I've been wanting to read for a while. So Okay, so basically, at the end of the day, I ended up giving this book a 3.75 stars, and it's just because there's still more to be discovered here. I think some parts did drag a little bit for me. I mean, it still fed into what was important within the development of what happens at the end of the book, but in my opinion, there's some things in there that I didn't feel that were necessary. But other than that, I enjoyed my time with this book. So I gave this book 3.75 stars. And I don't know when I'll start the second book, but hopefully I'll start it sometime within, I'm thinking maybe February 2022. So we shall see. Okay. So wow. The 8th book that I read in the month of October was, holy crap. This book was so incredible. And that book is Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark. Wow. This book, and look how thick this book is. I don't know how many pages are in this book. Hold on a minute. I also hybrid read this book. I read the physical and the audio book at the same time. So I wasn't hopping back and forth between the audio book and the physical book. I was actually listening to the audio while I was reading this, and wow, it made for such a better reading experience. So there's 181 pages in this book, and wow, my words are definitely not going to live up to the excellence of this book. This book, as you can tell, is an easy 5-star rating, and I am so glad I read it. This book was another mood read. This wasn't on my original October TBR, but I purchased this book initially in 2020 because of Jess Owens. Or did I purchase it? No, I purchased this book sometime this year. I just wasn't able to get to it, but I purchased this book because of Jess Owens. I believe this book made one of her top reads for 2020. And this book is just freaking pure brilliance. This book is so short, but yet it's packed and layered with so much history, culture, folklore, mythology, a character badassness. And it also contains a plot that's interweaved with so much and so many underlying themes and facts that are very much a part of the racist and oppressive history of the United States. And also the wonderful, wonderful, I don't even want to say fantasy element. I don't feel like a majority of this book is fantasy element, but the wonderful magic, the brilliantness that takes place in this book very much floored me. I feel like the magic in this book is such a small word to describe what I felt like reading it. I felt like it was an element that very much I feared and revered and respected. And it also felt very much divine and awe-inspiring. So I definitely need to read more books like this. This was so good. I don't even want to tell you what this book is about because it's just so short, but it's so brilliant as well. So easy 5-star read. Go read it. Go get this book. The audiobook is incredible, especially when it came to the different characters, and also there was some singing and just cultural elements that took place in this book that I could not just get from the physical read alone. So I definitely recommend a hybrid read for this book. But yeah, really amazing book. Really incredible. Go read it. Okay, so the last book, I actually have the physical book of this, but it's the last book that I read for the month of October was The Deep by Rivers Solomon. And wow, fantastic, super incredible, 6 5-star, 30-star read. Just go get it. The end. But in all seriousness, before I read the book, I saw on the book that that this book was very much inspired by Clipping's song "The Deep," and I gotta say that there are so many more reviewers, especially Black booktubers and Black book reviewers, that can give justice to this book and review this book a lot more fluent, a lot better than I can. And I just want to say that I think one of the reviews that I've read that I really appreciated was the review from Ashley from Bookish Realm. I think probably tonight I'm also going to watch the book discussion that Ashley hosted on this book. And I think that live book discussion took place last year. But I know many people may think that this is just simply a fantasy tale that's sold by fantasy elements or characters, or a fantasy novella of a mermaid history keeper, and how the Wergery, I think, or Wergeru, I think that's what they were called, are mermaids that are descendants of pregnant slaves that were thrown aboard from slave ships. But this book is so much more complex, powerful, and layered than the description that's on the back of this book. I started this book at the beginning of the month, and there was just so much complexity and emotion and power, and just I don't even know what to describe it, but it took me a while to read this book. And I feel like the dialogue was so strong and important and just so powerful in this book. And the dialogue that took place wasn't something to be easily set aside. I'm sure that I missed so many themes, and I'm sure so much of the complexities within this book may have completely blown over my head because I am not a member of the Black community. And but what I saw there was just historical and intergenerational trauma, and even how trauma impacts differently and deeply, and how pain affects people differently and deeply, and how that trauma and that pain and how it impacts us, and how it impacts the roots of us, even the roots of a peoples, and how pain and violence of marginalized communities, especially I imagine, or I can't even imagine, but the Black community is very much rooted in history and violence and generations of oppression, and how that oppression can internally affect a group of peoples all the way down to one individual being and one individual person. So this book is so incredible. There was just so many themes, and I'm sure I missed a lot of them. I think what I saw and what I experienced and what I read there was just amazing. So this book, I don't know what else or what more to say about it, but it was such an incredible read. And I will link Ashley's review down below, and I'll try to fish to, I'm pretty sure she probably reviewed or wrapped up this book in some time ago, but I'll try to look for that review as well on her BookTube channel. But yeah, this book is amazing. So I suggest y'all read it. It's such a fantastic read. Other than that, I think I am done with this October wrap up. I hope all of you are doing very, very well. I hope you are all safe. I hope you all are reading fiercely, and I wish for all of you to be safe, and I hope you are all well at this time. And until next time, I think pretty soon I'll be wrapping up my reads for November, or Indigeathon and nonfiction November. So yeah, so I guess I just want to throw one last shout out to Bree and her channel, The Lock Booktician. Thank you so much, Bree. Wow, I had such an amazing time with Blackoweenathon, and I am not worthy. I constantly praise your efforts in putting on such a amazing readathon. So yep, love you, Bree. Hope you're having a good one, and I shall see you all later. Bye, everyone.